The suitcase slipped from her hands, thudding against the polished floor of the terminal. Passengers turned briefly, uninterested, until a sharp, commanding voice crackled over the airport's radio system. It wasn't a soldier or a flight officer. It was her. The same young woman who had just been quietly helping an elderly man with his luggage now had the entire security team frozen in place, because her voice carried the unmistakable authority of someone who had been trained to command. Airports are built on movement. The constant hum of rolling wheels against tile, the shuffle of hurried shoes, the faint crackle of announcements echoing across glass and steel. In that crowd of thousands, one person helping another is almost invisible. Almost. Near the sliding glass doors of the International Departures Terminal, a young woman paused, watching an older man wrestle with his oversized suitcase. He had already tried once, heaving it onto a cart, but the stubborn case slid back, nearly toppling him over. His breathing was heavy, labored, his hands trembling slightly from the effort. Without hesitation, she stepped forward. "Here, let me help you with that," she said gently. Her tone was soft, ordinary, the kind of voice that made people comfortable. She wasn't in uniform. She wasn't standing tall with medals pinned to her chest. Just jeans, a fitted jacket, and a scarf that framed her face in the shifting airport light. She bent, gripped the handle with one hand and steadied the cart with the other. With surprising ease, she lifted the suitcase into place. "Thank you, miss," the man muttered, slightly embarrassed at needing help. She smiled. "Of course. We all need a hand sometimes." That was it. No crowd gathered. No spotlight shone down. To anyone watching, it was simply a small kindness. A human moment in a place where people are usually lost in their own rush. But if someone had been paying closer attention, they might have noticed something else. The way she lifted, not just with strength, but with precision. The way her posture snapped straight after the task was done. Even the simple act of adjusting the strap on her shoulder seemed measured, deliberate, as if muscle memory had been drilled into her long ago. For a brief moment, her eyes scanned the terminal, not frantically, but with an alertness that didn't belong to an ordinary traveler. She took in exits, security posts, uniformed guards, the crowd flow around the baggage scanners. Then her expression softened again, almost as if she'd caught herself being too vigilant. "Safe travels," she said to the man, stepping back into the river of passengers. To anyone else, she blended right back in. Another traveler, another face in the restless tide of departures. Yet there was an aura about her that didn't fully fade. She moved with the kind of quiet readiness people only notice when something forces them to look again. And that moment, when the world did look again, was only seconds away. It began with a sudden burst of static. The kind that crackles over every airport loudspeaker when a microphone hasn't been properly adjusted. Travelers paused, some glancing upward, some ignoring it entirely. After all, background noise is part of an airport's heartbeat. But then her voice cut through, calm, firm, commanding. "Unit 3, secure your position. Maintain line of sight. Do not advance until confirmation." Every head turned. The words weren't casual. They weren't the clipped instructions of a flight attendant announcing a gate change. They carried weight, measured, authoritative, drilled into cadence like a soldier on parade. The young woman who had just moments ago been invisible, helping with a suitcase, blending into the crowd, was now everywhere. Her voice flooded the intercom system, echoing across the cavernous hall. Travelers froze mid-step, scanning for the source. Security personnel stiffened, exchanging confused glances. Some instinctively straightened their posture, as if responding to a higher rank without even realizing it. Her tone shifted slightly, sharper now. "Unit 4, confirm visual. Unit 5, hold perimeter." A hush rippled through the terminal. Even children stopped their chatter. It wasn't fear that filled the space, it was recognition. That primal recognition of authority, the way a room goes silent when a commander enters. She hadn't raised her volume. She hadn't shouted. Yet the power in her voice carried more force than any alarm. Onlookers began whispering. "Who is she? Is this some kind of drill? That's not an airport announcement." Meanwhile, security officers scrambled. A few clutched their radios, trying to cut in. Others glanced at their supervisors, unsure of protocol. None of them moved with confidence, because, whether they admitted it or not, her voice felt more legitimate than theirs. At the far end of the hall, a uniformed sergeant attempted to override the system. His voice, tense and hurried, broke through the speakers. All units disregard last transmission. Repeat, disregard. But it was too late. The crowd's eyes weren't on him. They were searching for her. The woman whose tone resonated like she'd been born with authority in her lungs. And then, like a ripple spreading through still water, realization dawned on some of the older officers. They recognized the cadence, the precision, not of a civilian, not even of standard police, but of someone trained in higher command. Someone who had stood in front of soldiers and made them believe, without hesitation, that their lives depended on her words. Her eyes met theirs across the terminal. Calm, unflinching, as if she already knew the effect she was having. In that instant, she was no longer the stranger who helped with luggage. She was something entirely different. An unmasked presence. A force that didn't ask for respect but commanded it effortlessly. And the terminal, for the first time that day, felt less like a place of transit and more like a stage awaiting orders. The silence in the terminal stretched on, thick, unspoken, and charged. For a few long breaths, no one moved. It wasn't just that her voice had broken through the system. It was the way it had settled into everyone's bones. A tone that suggested order in chaos, clarity in confusion. The sergeant who had tried to override her transmission lowered his radio slowly, as though some unspoken hierarchy had already shifted. His eyes flickered between his men and the woman who stood, unassuming, among the passengers. For the first time in years, he wasn't certain he was the highest authority in the room. She didn't bask in the attention. She didn't grandstand or raise her chin. She simply stood, composed, her scarf resting neatly against her jacket, her gaze steady. A few travelers, without realizing it, straightened their backs in her presence. Parents hushed their children. Even the elderly man whose luggage she had helped minutes earlier watched her with wide-eyed recognition, as though the kindness of a stranger had transformed into the steel of a commander. A young officer approached, his movements hesitant. "Ma'am, who are you?" His voice carried both caution and awe. She studied him for a moment, then answered softly. Not through the loudspeakers this time, but directly to him. "Someone who knows what to do when others hesitate." It wasn't a boast. It was a fact, spoken with the kind of certainty that comes only from lived experience. The officer nodded almost unconsciously, like a soldier before a superior. He didn't even question why he was listening. Authority wasn't declared, it was felt. Around them, conversations began to swell again, but quieter, subdued. People whispered about her, speculated about her past. Some guessed military, others intelligence. A few thought she might be part of some undercover operation. But none of that mattered to the people standing nearest her. What mattered was that, in a moment of uncertainty, her voice had steadied the entire room. Respect wasn't something she had demanded. It wasn't something that came with a badge or a rank pinned to her chest. It was earned in an instant, the way she carried herself, the calm in her eyes, the weight of her tone. And it lingered. When the security team finally moved to reestablish order, they did so with a strange deference, careful not to undermine her presence. The sergeant cleared his throat, forced his voice to steady, and gave new instructions. Yet, even then, the echo of her voice still carried more gravity in the ears of those who had heard it. She adjusted her bag, offered the elderly man a final reassuring nod, and began walking toward her gate. To most, she would once again vanish into the blur of departures, just another traveler moving along. But for those who had been there, who had felt the weight of that moment, she would not be forgotten. Because in the space of a single act, lifting a suitcase, then commanding a room, she had reminded everyone of a timeless truth. Real authority cannot be faked. It reveals itself when the world needs it most.